message when I pick you.
I'd like to take issue with something what Josie said at the beginning, which is echoed by that chap who's there.
Sorry, could you just speak up a little bit?
Sorry?
Could you just speak up a little bit so we can
sorry. Because democracy is progress from tyranny. Let us take the example of Iraq. Now, in Iraq under Saddam Hussein, people had healthcare systems work, they had education work, they had transport infrastructure that worked, they had a good public service, public sector, etc. Even Persians living in Iran on the border used to view Iraq rather like the Texans view Mexico, and they used to drive there on a Saturday night and get drunk. So it's so comparatively liberal. Persia, which of course is our fault for our disgraceful treatment of the Shah. But Western democracy as it were, because it is part of our cultural heritage, it has been informed by 1,000 years of education. It has been informed by 3,000 years of Western philosophy. You go to somewhere like the wilds of Papua New Guinea, and you try and enfranchise people who are ignorant and superstitious. They're going to vote for politicians who will be ignorant and superstitious. They're not going to vote for some Capuan version of big plague. Indeed, I don't even think chameleons are native to New Guinea. You're getting to the end of the government, and that is going to destroy itself. It's not going to stay democracy for a long time. There is a reason why you have authoritarian regimes in places like China, and that's because Chinese philosophy has had this form of government appeal. I ask you all to oppose this motion.
I think it's ridiculous to use Iraq as an example at the moment. After 5 years, how could we expect a country to completely have changed its political environment? If we have a look at Germany after World War II and after invasion, you could say that there was a failure to impose democracy because half the country was under a dictatorship. That's fine, but now Germany is a very democratic and successful country. It takes a long time. I also think that we have to acknowledge that dictatorships tend to be aggressive. China in Tibet, Russia during the Cold War in Eastern Europe. Sometimes fire has to be met with fire. Sometimes the West should stand up and say, actually, it's not acceptable for you to do that, and we are going to come into your country and we are going to show you that your ways are wrong and that possibly there is a better way. It might take a long time, it might take some friction. I'd also like to say that the people who are citing the countries not wanting you to go in, and it's not a democratic process. Well, when you've got a small regime of people running the country who have a state police and a very powerful military, it's difficult to have a vote on whether or not you want to be invaded by a foreign force. So I think sometimes we just need to understand that these countries need to have their dictatorships taken away, and therefore then they can have the power to at least decide the sort of political system that they then want to be part of. Thank you very much.
Tom Burton Hatfield. I'd just like to say, I think it's idealistic if you think that powerful countries will actually put democracy at the forefront of their foreign policy. I think if you look at the history of intervention, it tends to be that other vested interests or national interests tend to guide policy, whether it's natural resources, let's say oil, which I think is Iraq and Afghanistan, or whether it's to do with national security. I think it tends to be that powerful countries, when they intervene, won't actually place democracy at the forefront of their strategy. And thus I think it's a little bit, I think it's useless to actually propose it as something that powerful countries will actually do. And I think we should have a more realistic perspective of intervention as something that tends not to be so benevolent. And in the long term, very few countries, it seems, very few countries have been able to actually successfully impose democracy. Like which powerful countries have actually successfully imposed democracy. I don't know where it's happened.
We now move to the summary speeches. I'd like to give Professor Frost a couple of minutes just to respond to some of the floor points before Harplegrove continues with the rest of the summary.
Just a quick couple of responses. One, against the do nothing point that you raised, sir. At no point in my speech did I say that the right thing to do was to do nothing. You would have heard me say that we, rights-respecting people, have a duty to nurture democracy in whatever way we can. And there are 101 ways in which that can be done. And I quoted South Africa as an example where the international community did the right thing. So I was not claiming we should sit on our hands and watch tyrants do their thing. There's a lot we can do against tyrants, short of military intervention. So I wanted to make that as a primary point. The secondary point, just in response to the last comment, is that no people who have been offered democracy turn it down. We should not imagine, for example, that were democracy to become, when it becomes available to the people of China, that they'll say, no thanks, we rather like the authoritarian rule. They're not likely to say that. There's a lot of history behind that comment of mine. And my last point is, and this is, although my co-speaker and I are on the same side with regard to this proposition, we probably differ about this point, is the way in which you spread human rights and democracy is not through the barrel of the gun, but is by trading. It's by spreading global civil society, by pulling individuals into the rights exercising business of playing in the market. That's how people get a sense of themselves as empowered players. And once they're into that, they start demanding more for themselves. People who are in that will inevitably start demanding more and start demanding democracy. So democracy will win in the long run without military intervention. Thank you.